The number one thing that ends poker careers prematurely is that dreaded downswing. Downswings hurt. And in this video, I'm going to provide the full guide to surviving that dreaded downswing. I'm going to talk about what happens to most players when they're on a downswing, how you can best get out of it and manage it, and I'm going to talk about one of my own recent downswings and the things that I did to get back on track. But first, let's talk about what really goes on during a downswing. Of course, money is lost. This is obvious. But what's not talked about as much is the loss of confidence. What happens to most players when they go on a downswing is they're not just thinking about, having X amount of dollars less. They're also thinking about mental projections. Maybe they thought their win rate was a certain level, and after, a couple months of losing, all of a sudden they're questioning whether they can count on that hourly into the future. So the scary thing about a downswing is it's not just about what's already happened, it's about these future projections that come into our mind that play with our confidence. So another thing that happens to players is they tend to have a shorter fuse during downswings. A lot of people can shake off things pretty easily when things are going well, but consider these three events in poker and how you handle them during a downswing. Number one, a player keeps hanking pre-flop or in unnecessary spots, and it's costing you all sorts of time and hands at the table. Number two, you make a hero call with ace high, a player shrugs and he says, I guess you're good, and then he shows bottom pair, only to cost you another pot on a day you cannot win a hand to save your life. Number three, there's a spot where the straddle goes on for one orbit, and it's the one orbit where you have pocket queens, another player has ace king offsuit, you get all in pre-flop, you lose the flip, and this type of action would have never happened if the stakes had been reduced, but it just so happened to be that one orbit, and now here we are, and the game breaks. These are all things that happen when you're on a downswing. And when you're running good, they're normal annoyances of poker that you can easily shake off. When you're running poorly, maybe not so much. What else happens on a downswing? A lot of players over-adjust with bad strategy adjustments. They tend to do too much, either tightening up because they're worried about losing hands, they're worried about losing more money, and they kind of go into a shell and just wait for the nuts. Other players, they go in the opposite direction, they become way too aggressive, and now all of a sudden, they're forcing plays that aren't there. They're making big bluffs to get their money back. They're making big hero calls. They have the mentality that I can't get this money back if I fold, so I'm just going to force the issue until it goes my way. These are common traps. And another one is bad adjustments with volume. So some players, when they're stuck, they play way, way too long, like marathon sessions where they're not at their best. And when they're not at their best, on average, the other players are going to be playing better because you're punting off money to them and boosting their confidence. So this is exactly the spot to avoid. But some players go in the opposite direction, and now they can't get in any volume during a downswing because they're just too emotionally upset and their confidence is shaken. So these are both things that we're going to talk about how to deal with. And lastly, poor bankroll management is a big marker of a lot of downswings. Some people, the downswing really hits after they've made a big purchase. They've withdrawn money from their poker bankroll that they never should have withdrawn. It should have remained in a separate account, as I've talked about in previous videos. And now that they've made the big purchase and they go on a downswing, it's just this double whammy to their bankroll, and all of a sudden it feels like poker is just this uphill battle. Other players, they chase their money by playing up in stakes that are too high for them, trying to win back their money when they're not at their best in that moment, and this is where things can go horribly wrong. So this is all part of the experience of a downswing, and it's really what we want to learn how to manage better, because as I mentioned, this is the number one thing that kills poker careers, and I really do believe that the mark of a long-term successful poker pro is that they are better at dealing with the dreaded downswing better than the average player. So what are the things we can do to give ourselves the best chance of getting out? Well, number one, we need to work with and befriend those difficult emotions. So many people jump right into strategy adjustments, like what do I need to do to get out of this? How do I plug this leak? But meanwhile, their mind isn't right. It's basically colored by past events. They're still angry, they're still on tilt, even as they're going home and studying. And so you can bet that any strategy adjustments they make are going to be counterproductive from that mental state. So first, players really need to sit with and even befriend some of those negative emotions, quote unquote negative, or we'll call them more difficult emotions. Really, no emotion is negative once you learn how to kind of sit with it and be with it. And this is where meditation is so important. And really, it allows you to create some space around what is happening internally so you can go back to making great decisions. Exercise is another way to kind of move some of that energy out of the body and kind of process what has happened, get rid of some of that toxic stuff that you've been sitting on, and also create that greater space for better decision making. And really just coming back to practicing self-care first, eating healthy, getting enough sleep, and really not believing your thoughts too much at times like this. Your thoughts are going to make all sorts of negative predictions about what the future is going to look like, what your win rate is going to look like now that X, Y, and Z have happened in the recent past. And it's better to just take your thoughts with a grain of salt at this time and just keep moving forward, doing the things that you know are productive and not give them too much belief. Next, after that space has been created through self-care, it's especially important to be honest about your play. Okay, so there are going to be hands where there's literally nothing you could have done. This happens a lot during a downswing where variance is just cruel, right? You're set up with coolers, you know, you're at the victim of set over set a few times, you lose with kings against aces, then you get it in with aces against kings, and now you're sucked out on. These types of things happen. You also tend to go more carded during these periods, you miss your draws. This is all part of variance. And a really skilled poker player is able to look at hands like that and be able to tell the difference between hands that I could have actually done something and hands where the variance was just too strong. So reviewing hands with a friend to really get an honest perspective and another set of eyes, sending your hands to a poker coach. These are ways that if you're not already skilled at kind of differentiating between variance and hands where you actually made a mistake or could have done something better to improve, this is the way to get that feedback that you need. Don't waste your time on any bad beat stories. This is the #1 way to burn energy, to push away people that might otherwise help you. It's just like dwelling on the past in this futile way that prevents you from moving forward in a way that's productive. And in fact, if you're still repeating these stories out loud to other people, or even on repeat to yourself in your head, it's a good sign that you still have a lot of unfelt emotions, you haven't processed, you haven't moved through yet, and you should probably go back to step 1 of self-care before jumping into some of those strategy adjustments. And then we want to take action. Once that space has been created, once we're in a good mental frame to be making adjustments, we want to take action and really make small adjustments first. And often small adjustments, especially if you're a winning player, they're really the only type of adjustments we should be making. It's very rare to be overhauling your entire poker game if you're already a winning player. And of course, you can't really be going on a downswing if you're a losing player, because essentially everything is a downswing at that point. So this video is really geared towards people that have tasted poker success, but now it's kind of turned on them, and now it's time to make some small tweaks. So a really good thing to do is to pull together all of those hands that you looked at with your friends, with your poker coach, where you got some sort of feedback from other people, and try to put them into patterns and categories and see if the hands where you were losing a lot of money or making a lot of mistakes tended to follow some sort of pattern. Maybe there's an overcalling leak that we're trying to address. Maybe we're overfolding in big spots because we get timid. You'll likely see some pattern across the majority of hands where you were losing money that allows you to identify what the key link is that you need to focus on. Also, be willing to move down in stakes temporarily. Don't be embarrassed by this. Don't be afraid of it. This is a great way to rebuild confidence, just to see, like sometimes for a basketball player, once they make a free throw, the announcers always love to say, like, the hoop just gets bigger because you see that ball go in the hoop. Now it gives you confidence to start making those contested three-point shots again. Sometimes that's what moving down in stakes is really like. And if we are, making some mistakes, we're still tilting, we're making some bad plays, at least it's going to be less expensive at the lower stake level, as opposed to what other people do, moving up in stakes, chasing their losses. This is where things can get really catastrophic. So those are some of the things to really focus on to get out of a downswing. Now, I want to talk about my own downswing recently. And, at first I thought it'd be kind of painful to talk about this. But really, it's a huge part of the poker experience. I'd say maybe, I don't know, for a serious player, maybe up to like a quarter of the time, you are fending off some sort of, minor-ish downswing. And for me, it's been no different. So I was actually coming off my very best year last year, and I decided with my wife to buy a house. And of course, in that moment, right after, nearly right after doing that, I fell victim to my worst downswing of my career. It was a 20K downswing, which, some people will look at it and say, well, you're buying in games ranging from like, $2,000 to $4,000 buy-ins. This really isn't that bad, but it's still hurt, losing that amount of money at a time where I had just spent this amount of money on a big purchase. And a lot of emotions were coming up and thoughts were coming up about like being a homeowner and playing a game as volatile as poker. And, is my win rate as high as I thought it was? And so I'm processing all of these things. And I really leaned on my meditation practice to kind of move through some of those difficult emotions, get back in touch with my confidence, and allow some of those thoughts to pass through without believing in them too much. Focused a lot on exercise, did a lot of cardio, a lot of weightlifting, and really created kind of that space that I talked about earlier as part of self-care. I also took some time off. I took a week off. I did some other things that I enjoy outside of poker. Like, I followed the NBA playoffs very closely. I got together with family and friends, and I just tended to other hobbies to remind myself that poker is not my everything. And there are going to be these times where, things just aren't going my way. And that's okay. I can learn to still get through it and still have a long career in this game. And when I came back, I felt refreshed, and I felt like I was in a place to actually start making the strategy adjustments. I cleared my head well, and from this point, I really analyzed a lot of my hands. I did some solver work. I identified a few leaks spots where I thought I was calling too much, some spots where I thought maybe I wasn't calling down light enough. I took a couple online courses that really reset my focus. They gave me some great pointers and some new ideas to incorporate into my game. I think it's always important, even if you're a poker coach, to be learning constantly. Poker's an ever-evolving game. I certainly don't know everything there is to know about it, and I don't think I ever will. And so just having kind of that beginner's mindset, I think, was really helpful. And a lot of great things came out of this because I just got back in touch with what I liked about poker, why I enjoyed it, beyond just the winning money. I really got back in touch with enjoying the camaraderie at the table, enjoying the strategy side of the game, enjoying the meditation retreat of kind of having to manage these difficult events and still manage them better than my competition would, and viewing that as a potential source of edge. So at the time, I really hated this experience, but as it wore on and I kind of saw the value in it, I realized that the downswing was there to make me a stronger player and honestly a stronger person, because now if I'm hit with this type of thing, if I'm hit with another 20K downswing, it's not something I fear because I know exactly how to climb out of it. And I truly believe that learning how to master this is a separator that can provide longevity. So if any of you are struggling with a downswing of this magnitude, maybe a greater magnitude, maybe less, just know that I'm here for you. Feel free to book a free consult with me or subscribe to this channel for more content just like this.